we had to play around with the processing. We ended up getting this special machine that can it sort of really quickly heats the product, so it does it within 10 seconds and it gets it to a really high heat, but it does it so quickly that the fat and like the moisture around the protein protects the proteins, so it doesn't degrade the protein, because that was something we were worried about with if we over process and kill all the protein and stuff like that. So with some clever processing technology, we got around that, and we tested and made sure that it was able to kill like pathogens, things like that.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Poultry Podcast. My name is Jason Emmert, and I'll be your host today as we discuss a fascinating topic, the use of food waste for feeding poultry. Our guest is Dr. Amy Moss, who is a postdoctoral research fellow at the University of New England in Australia. Welcome, Dr. Moss. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you very much for having me today.
We're so excited to discuss this topic, but to get us started, could you take us just a bit through your academic journey? How did you arrive at this point in your career?
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, I'm Australian. I'm currently a postdoctoral fellow at the University of New England. So for those of you, if you're not familiar, you might know where New South Wales is in Australia. I'm about 8 hours from Sydney, basically, further inward. So out in the country. But I've been at UNE for about 4 years now. Before that, I did my PhD at the University of Sydney. And before that, I did my bachelor's in animal and veterinary bioscience also at the University of Sydney. And while doing my bachelor's, I did an honours program in poultry and just absolutely fell in love with it. And that's basically how I ended up here.
When it comes to raising healthy animals, you need more than the right solutions. You need the right partner who brings decades of industry expertise and a global team to put that knowledge to work for the advancement of your operation. At Phibro Animal Health Corporation, we are proud to work with you as your trusted partner.
Probably a common story, I think, for a lot of us. So did you grow up around poultry at all, or that was a new experience for you?
Well, not really. I've always lived on the coast. I've always had, since I was 4 years old, I've had birds. And so that's where that love of birds started. And I started breeding poultry when I was in senior years of high school.
Oh, very good. Yeah. So a little bit of background there.
Yeah, a little bit. Not a farming background, but definitely a bird background.
That's okay. So what drew you more into the nutrition side of things, or looking at feeding? Is that something that you worked on throughout your graduate career?
Yeah. So throughout my undergrad, I was always interested in the nutrition topics. And so it just sort of seemed sensible to combine my love of poultry with nutrition, which I really enjoyed. And of course, poultry are just such fascinating animals, and their feed efficiency just amazes me. So that was an interesting path for me to start to go down.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah, the feed efficiency is astounding. Sometimes I feel like I can rival it, but I know I'm not accumulating muscle, I'm pretty sure. So. Yeah, well, great. Now, I'm just curious, and teaching is one of the areas that I'm very passionate about. Did you have some really good nutrition classes that kind of drew you in as well, or how did that work?
Yeah, we did. We had some really interesting nutrition classes, and I did my my honors with Professor Peter Selly, and he was fantastic, and he definitely got me into it. And so he does all his research in poultry nutrition.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting to me as I look at students to see, how they determine what path they're going to go down. And sometimes it's a particular great class, but, different people react differently to the same class, and everybody has their thing that they want to get into. So glad that you were attracted to the area of nutrition and have some good things to share with us today.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. So, Couple of exciting things going on. It sounds like you have this publication, new publication that came with. What's the best way to jump into this topic of food waste and feeding poultry?
Probably to talk about the publication first, because then that sort of leads.
Yeah,
The award is sort of like the next
you
steps
bet.
of research. Yeah, but it's very exciting.
Absolutely. That sounds like a good plan. Yeah, so tell us about the basics of the paper that just came out. It looks like you were feeding food waste to laying hens, looking at egg production, looking at a lot of the parameters we would expect for a laying hen trial. Yeah.
Yeah, so I can give the background to what led to this sort of project. I've always been interested in alternative feed ingredients, particularly here in Australia. I don't know what it's like in the US. You guys have a pretty big corn soy market, so maybe it's not so bad. But in Australia, we have to import all our soybean meal, and it is so expensive. It's $1,000 per ton Australian now. So yeah, it's doubled in the last year. So it's really tough on our poultry industry. The feed costs make up like 80% of production costs. Yeah. So the industry is scrambling for alternative sources of protein and just alternative feed sources that are cheaper, but then also if we don't have to import it, that's also a good thing. So I've been doing some research on alternative feed ingredients, and I was approached by company Food Recycle, who were interested in taking just food waste and processing it so that it's safe to feed and feeding it to animals. So we wanted to have a go at feeding it to poultry, and we picked hens because they're pretty forgiving as far as like out their nutritional diets are concerned compared to broiler chickens. It would be much more difficult. Yeah, so then this is how we got into this food waste research, and so we basically started collecting different food waste sources from around the local area. So we got hospital and nursing home waste and like restaurant waste from the local places. We got brewers' grains from some local breweries here. We got fruit and veg and fish offal from the Sydney markets. And we like processed it and formulated a diet and fed it to some hens.
Very interesting. Now, the food waste, especially like from hospitals and nursing homes, is that food that never got served, food that they didn't prepare, or food that was served and not consumed, or is it a combination of
all
all
of
the
the
above?
above. Yep. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it had a really high fat and salt content, even the food from the
Mhm.
hospital, which was interesting. So
That is, that is. Yeah,
human diets are not so good. So yeah, we were
right.
a bit concerned about how the
Yeah.
hens were going to handle our handle our waste food. Yeah, very high fat, high salt, but that just made up a smaller part of the food waste diet.
Yeah, that is. It interests me. The especially post serve, unconsumed food, because the potential is there for so many other kinds of contamination as people are disposing of this. So I think it was mentioned in the paper that was one of the things that has to be done is separate out foreign objects or foreign material from
Yeah,
the
we were
food waste as it's
finding like
processed.
bread clips and elastic bands and all sorts of things. Yeah, so that
Sure,
has to be
sure.
processed out. Um, and I mean, not to mention the variability, of course, if you're getting discarded food, things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and oh, go ahead. I'm
I was
sorry.
just going to say the bulk of our diet was more like the brewer's grains, the bakery waste, things like that that come from factories that are much more stable.
Right. Yeah, that's going to be a high volume, depending on
Yeah.
the factory potentially.
Yeah.
Yep. Over time, absolutely. Yeah. So that could be a more consistent source of food waste, but I really do think if we can find ways to incorporate the other kinds of waste that you're talking about, that's a big game changer in a lot of ways.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And we were sort of thinking like if you were going to do it on a commercial scale, the more places that you could collect it from, just create a big batch and blend it up, it would sort of even it out.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can take care of some of those variability issues with just consistency of volume, high volumes. Yeah, Absolutely. What were the challenges on that front end then, do you think, aside from variability, any other particular challenges on the collection side as you're trying to gather in the different products?
Well, yeah. So we had to play around with the processing. We ended up getting this special machine that can it sort of really quickly heats the product. So it does it within 10 seconds and it gets it to a really high heat, but it does it so quickly that the fat and like the moisture around the protein protects the proteins, so it doesn't degrade the protein. Because that was something we were worried about with if we over process and kill a lot of protein and stuff like that. So with some clever processing technology, we got around that, and we tested and made sure that it was able to kill like pathogens, things like that. Especially this research was conducted during COVID, so I guess talking about pathogens and biosecurity was sort of at everyone's key focus at that time. Yeah, but mostly the main problem, challenge would be variability. But I think we could work on that too if we could create a NIR profile for the food waste. That would probably be the way to go.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's lots of technologies, lots of ways we could approach that for sure. Yep. The processing side I find really interesting too, because you have to think about how often do you collect? Do you process as you collect, or do you collect larger volumes and process? And there's just
definitely.
so many variables there.
And what we learnt too is you definitely want to process it close to the site that you're collecting it from, because you don't want to be trucking around all that water for nothing.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. And I think that's why, and we can certainly get into this more, but down the road, you think about the possibilities of doing this fairly locally to minimize some of that transport. And there's some exciting possibilities there.
Yeah, definitely.
Great. So you have the material and you bring it in and you've processed it. So where did you go from there?
Yeah, so then we were formulating the diets for the chickens. And that was an interesting exercise in itself, because we had, like I said, the food scraps were high fat, high salt. We had the fruit and vegetable meal, provided a lot of really good vitamins and minerals, things like that, but had a lot of fiber. And in the end, the diets ended up being much higher fat and salt and fiber compared to the commercial control diets, but they also had higher protein, and a lot of the energy came from fat, whereas in the commercial diet it's mostly from carbohydrates with all the grains. But we ended up being able to formulate a diet that was 99% food waste, so we just had a little bit of pigment in there and a little bit of vitamin and mineral supplement as well, and some enzymes, just like carbohydrates enzymes, just in case if we needed them. But yeah, it was pretty much 99% food waste. So previously, people have only really looked at an individual waste stream as a component of a diet. They've not really just done a full food waste diet. But we wanted to really give it a good whack and have a go.
Right. Yeah, there's quite a bit of research out there, and you were talking earlier about alternative feed ingredients and taking one ingredient or a couple of ingredients and seeing how we can incorporate that. And that's great. But yeah, looking at ways to incorporate a broader range and a more considerable proportion of the diet, that's pretty interesting.
So where it really gets interesting is when you start talking about costs. So a lot of the food waste, like even the abattoir waste that we got, it was free. Like they were happy to get rid of it. Yeah, even a lot of places, especially like the Sydney fish markets, places like that, they're getting rid of fish offal, which really is quite a valuable product, but because they just need to get rid of it, so they're paying for disposal. So if you say, "Oh, I'll come and take it for free," it seems like quite a good deal for them, and it's quite a good deal for you too. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's where I think there's some significant potential.
Yeah, and that sort of balances out.
Ways to,
the variability doesn't really matter so much anymore if your diet's like a fraction of the cost. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And you can even, conceivably, just depending on your approach and the markets you're trying to supply, but you could conceivably adjust for some differences in performance if there were some, based
Yeah.
on what your input
So
costs
when
are.
we were when we were formulating the diets, our original hypothesis was, okay, these hens are probably not going to perform as well on these diets, but that's okay because the diets are going to be so much cheaper. But then we started feeding the diets to the hens, and we were so surprised. But by the end of the study, they had a better performance than the commercial birds, which was just such a surprise, like such an amazing final result.
Oh, absolutely. So take us through just a little bit of the results and kind of the things that you did see. And I thought it was interesting that the two parts, the two time periods in the trial, a little bit of difference early on, and you were able to adjust for that. I think it had to do with some of the higher protein and fat.
Yeah, with the variability we were talking about. So we were feeding. So the calcium source in the food waste diets was oyster shell meal. That was just came from the fish market. So there was a fair bit of variability in that, with the calcium content and also with the particle size of the oyster shells. So we had a little bit of trouble with processing that at the start. So that first 10 weeks, we had quite a bit of variability in the calcium. And by the end of the first 10 weeks, the shells of the eggs from the hens were thinner, and they had a lower breaking strength. So they were much more brittle. But yeah, so we identified that probably the calcium digestibility wasn't as good as we thought, or there was some variability. So we retested the calcium in the oyster shell meal, reformulated the diet, and then, the remaining 10 weeks, the shell quality improved, and there was no difference then. But yeah, the chickens were eating. Oh, they were eating less feed as well, so they had a better feed conversion.
Right. Yeah, I thought that was pretty striking, the feed conversion difference. Uh, you know, but I think that's what my former advisor would call serendipity, that you were able to even show that you could make that adjustment and get the shell breaking strength back to
Yeah, it
where it
was
was in
pretty
the
a handy
controls.
little
So,
thing.
yeah.
It was, yeah,
Hmm.
just proving that it
Hmm.
can be troubleshooted. And that's the
Yes.
thing with food waste. You just have to have a lot more monitoring than you otherwise would with a commercial diet.
Yep. I think especially initially, as if you were getting started in an enterprise like this, probably over time you begin to learn more and more
Oh,
about
definitely.
how to
Yeah.
apply it. Yeah.
And if you're
Yeah.
getting the same food waste from the same sources, you get to know that product pretty well, and yeah, it become much more manageable. But yeah, when you're jumping in and you've never done it before, we certainly learned a lot in those first those first few weeks.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first things, and you alluded to this earlier, but one of the first things I thought when I was thinking of food waste, particularly food waste that could have meat products in it, was the disease potential, and we're coming off of COVID, but also the African swine fever that was such a problem in many parts of the world. We're obviously not concerned about that with poultry, but with these kind of products, if they were fed to swine, that would be something to keep an eye on. But it sounds like in the processing, those concerns would be addressed.
Yeah, yeah. There was some testing done by the food recycle company, and yeah, they found that it killed off the prions and things like that. So we didn't have any concerns with the food waste because of the processing. But yeah, the Europe's really been making some strides towards reducing regulations surrounding feeding food waste back to animals anyway. So we're expecting Australia to follow suit.
Yeah, with the pendulum swung pretty far in the
Yeah,
regulatory direction.
it
Yeah, and
did,
it's
and I think they're sort of starting to realize, oh, we're while it is important to have that biosecurity, we do also need to be sustainable in our industries, in all of our animal industries. So if we can't feed food waste to animals, there's a huge chunk of um, of food, a valuable product that we're just letting go to waste instead of being able to use it effectively. And in Australia, like it's 7.5 million tons of food waste goes into landfill every year, which is a lot. I can't imagine what it must be in the US.
Just staggering.
Yeah, because we're only tiny compared to you guys.
Yeah, you can't really wrap your mind around it. It's yeah, too large. Yeah. Well, and if we're effective problem solvers, and I think in the poultry industry we have been over the years, then those concerns, those biosecurity concerns, are things that we should be able to tackle, and figure out how to create a situation where that's no longer a concern.
Definitely. And I mean, if we're making so much savings in the diet, there's a lot of money that can be invested towards things like that.
For sure. Yeah. Those potential savings are a strong incentive for additional research and figuring out how to solve those problems. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's interesting to me too. Another thing that struck me in thinking about this is there has been quite a bit of consumer pushback in the U.S., or maybe I'd even phrase it as perceived consumer pushback against the use of animal byproducts in animal feed. And so now there are different companies, different feeds that promote themselves as all veg or not containing any animal byproduct. And I'm wondering just your thoughts on that and how we might address that or alleviate those concerns. I'm not sure if that's something happening in Australia as well.
I don't think it's happening as strongly here. It's not something that I've seen a major push for. Here it's in the poultry industries, we're having huge pushes towards free range production rather than cage. That's probably where all the focus is at the moment. But yeah, I can certainly see that. But it would just be putting forward that argument to the consumer, what's important. So, for example, when we're talking about free range production here in Australia, it kind of gets down to, well, what's really important. Is it the animal welfare? Is it the sustainability? Because the sustainability is worse of a free range versus, a cage production, that sort of thing. So I think if we just share with the consumer, okay, you can have, no animal byproducts, but this is the cost to sustainability and to the environment, then they might change their mind.
Yeah, I think if they understood the full picture, the full scope of it, the message of sustainability, the message of being able to upcycle those products and not have them go to a landfill, should resonate with a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's got a pretty positive, a pretty positive message, and certainly in Australia, people are really keen on recycling and things like that. So, and circular economies and things like that. So yeah, I think it's definitely a practice in animal production that would be fairly easy to sell to the consumers. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good. I talked to my class about the issue, and that's the thing is that with so many things, I mean, number one, they're complex, and number two, there may not be what anyone considers a perfect solution, but we have to find best solutions.
Definitely. And Australia is home of the duopolies too. So
yes.
pretty much we're always controlled by what like Coles and Woolworths and like the two main supermarket chains here want to do as well, not just the consumers.
Sure.
So it's a lot of fun navigating that environment.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Challenges. Now, I'm curious, do you foresee this eventually getting down to the household level of being able to potentially collect food waste from individual households? I'm not sure if that's something that anyone is doing at any place currently, but
no, it's something I've not seen happening at the moment. But that would really be fantastic if it could. So I see sort of the first stages as poultry companies in Australia implementing the commercial waste first, because that's just really low-hanging fruit that's easily done. Less variability, so it's a much easier thing to start with, big volumes. And then, from there, it'd be interesting to see where it can go.
Yeah, I was wondering too if we may not have progressed to this level yet, but eventually if you envision being able to have an understanding of how much food waste an individual bird might consume, kind of back calculating to the amount that would need to be collected over time, or the size of population in an area that would be needed to produce enough food waste for a particular industry. But there's so many variables there. It's probably a little early for that, perhaps.
Yeah, but there is. I was sort of doing some back of the envelope calculations, and there is so much food waste. It could provide quite a good chunk of the feed for the poultry industry.
I think we may be surprised and even perhaps disappointed to find out how much it could provide.
Yeah.
Because again, that puts in perspective the quantities we're talking about.
Yep. Yeah, it is no small amount. So it would definitely, make a big difference.
Right. Were there any particular kinds of food waste that we need to make sure we avoid? Are there sources that you think might not be appropriate for poultry? I haven't thought of any in my mind, but I was wondering, if there were any concerns on that end.
Well, we sort of just worked with the ones that we knew would be probably the best for the hens. Like I said, we were a bit concerned about the really high salt, high fat sort of sources. It worked okay in the diets we had. The excreta moisture only increased about 3%, so it was pretty negligible, not really worth worrying about. But yeah, if you were to get really high salt diets, things like that, you'd want to avoid sources like that. But yeah, I can't really think of any off the top of my head that would be totally disastrous. You just got to sort of get a bit creative. I know Food Recycle was looking into paunch, things like that, different abattoir waste, even looking at the discarded hides and things like that. So it'd just be interesting to see, how much, it'll come down to what enzymes can we add to make pretty indigestible things digestible. Feather meal, stuff like that.
I wondered with, thinking of regulations, if there were any particular regulations that applied to places like hospitals or nursing homes to avoid potential contamination with medications, or you just sometimes you think something seems simple, but then
who knows? Yeah,
it gets
there could be
trickier
something. Complex. Yeah, potentially there could be. Nothing that I've heard about anyway. Medication ending.
I think on the collection end, it just has to be done properly and carefully, and
that's right. And there'll be all these little
those,
nuances
that
that will come into it. That's where I think starting with the commercial is definitely the easiest way to go, and then can get a little bit more brave and explore these new and different sources. And it just depends what's local to some of the big food producers too.
So what do you see as maybe some of the barriers to incorporating this, or what might be holding us back at the current time?
Well, I think that, certainly in Australia anyway, it's just so different to anything that we've been doing. So I guess there's a little bit of fear there surrounding, using this new product. There'd also have to be new processing equipment brought into feed mills, which it's already tightly packed in a feed mill. They've already got a lot going on. So, adding our new bins and new ingredients is a pretty big deal. Yeah, so I just sort of see, I get there's just that bit of hesitation because it's a new thing. But I think, we can start slow, just incorporate a little bit of food waste here and there, some easy things. And I think as soon as producers start seeing just the reductions in feed costs that they can get, it'll just be a landslide once they just dip their toe in the water sort of thing.
Sure. It may take that one entrepreneurial producer to lead the charge.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And in Australia, the laying hens, it's fairly unintegrated. So, there's some smaller producers that might have a bit of a niche market, might be able to charge a premium even for eggs from hens fed food waste. So let's see what happens on that front.
Yeah, there's some very creative people. They always seeing new angles. Yep. Yeah, that makes it exciting. Well, good. Yeah, I was wondering, if you can address the variability issues, and you can address even stability of storing the feed product. We haven't talked about that, but does it create a pretty stable
Yeah, if you
source? Yeah.
when we dried it down with that processing technology, we added a little bit of antioxidant to some of the really fatty, like fish offal sort of sources of food waste. But yeah, so we had the foods, we had it prepared and stored like for a fair while before the trial started, and then had it throughout the trial, and then even after the trial, we didn't clean it up straight away, and so at least 6 months had passed, and the food waste that we still had was fine. It didn't look rancid, like it didn't seem rancid at all. We tested it, it seemed okay. Even things like the bakery waste, I would have thought there would be a potential for mold of that, but it stored pretty well. So yeah, I think that it's got a decent shelf life once you get that moisture out of it.
Yep. And I'm sure in our research settings, we need to be more concerned about shelf life than high throughput industries where they
Yeah, that's right. We had it
shouldn't
sitting
be as much
around
of a
for a while.
concern.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that in
Yeah.
itself was a nice little test just to see, how it would work. We were even just, starting this, we weren't even sure if the hens would eat the feed, what the palatability would be, but they really, they quite liked it, especially the bakery waste. I mean, I would eat it. It smelled like donuts, so
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely.
I reckon pigs would go mad for it.
So, are you seeing this as maybe closer to chapter 1 or chapter 20? Where do you feel like you are in this journey of investigating this topic?
I think we're sort of just at the beginning of it. So we've just finished that pilot project in hens. We saw that we were just hoping to see that the hens ate it and still kept laying eggs, and they did fantastic. So that was just one small pilot study, and so now we're continuing the research. One of the things that we want to work out was, why did the hens do so well on the food waste diet? That wasn't something that we were expecting. And sure, the diets had a slightly more nutritionally dense content, but yeah, we were surprised by those feed conversions. They also had much better energy digestibility. So that's sort of what we've been thinking about lately. And I think it really gets back to some basic biology of poultry. So, chickens originated from jungle fowl. They would have been out in the jungles. They would have been omnivores, eating insects, bits of fruit, maybe some grains, but not that many. Whereas now, we're loading them up with grains. We're feeding them a lot of carbohydrates. And some of the work that I did in my PhD was looking at, the antagonisms between carbohydrates and amino acid digestibility and absorption. And one of the sorts of things that we found was, if you had too many carbs, too much sugars being digested all at once, it sort of overloaded some of the transport systems in the gut. So we're thinking that potentially providing a bunch of that energy as fat rather than carbohydrates could be quite beneficial to the birds. So so there's some really deep biology sort of learnings that we could take from this and that we want to explore further.
It is a different mindset for a nutritionist to think of the potential for a low-cost ingredient that has high nutrient quantity, and where can we go when we're over-formulating? What are the effects of over-formulating? We really haven't been trying to do that for quite a while.
Yeah.
So it is.
It's a different game. It's really strange formulating with food waste. Yeah. And just so much fiber, so much nutrient. Yeah, and cost really isn't a limiting factor. So it's exciting. It's an interesting feed ingredients to play with, that's for sure.
It is. And I think we've come to the point where people, whether they're in industry or on the consumer side, are understanding the importance of the issues better and some of the incentives for pursuing this. that could be beneficial for the bird, the company, the consumer, for the planet, for everybody.
Definitely. Yeah. So
Yeah.
the main sort of areas that now we're going to start looking into is trying it out in broiler chickens, which will be the harder bird to master it
Sure.
in. They're not as forgiving as hens are, so let's see how we go.
Right. What will the approach be, or you might be planning on different approaches? Are you thinking of just comparing in a more aggressive type of growth, or comparing in a slower growth type of system? Or I suppose everything could be on the table if you wanted to look at it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so we're just going to try with some of the more suitable food waste, things like the brewer's grains, bakery, fruit and veg, stuff that's not going to be, too much salt in particular for the broilers. And just see how we go. So we're just going to do maybe some small pilot work looking at different feed ingredients, testing the palatability of them with the broiler chickens as well. Seeing maybe starting at smaller amounts of the food waste in the diet and building that up, seeing how far we can push them. Yeah, because they have such incredible performance, it's going to be interesting to see how they respond.
Right. Right. Do you anticipate down the road doing any consumer panels, seeing if there's any impact on meat quality, any of the attributes of meat quality?
Yeah, we definitely should. That would be something really interesting to look at. Even with the eggs, we didn't do any like tasting panels of the eggs or anything like that. So that would be good to look at. And that would be something actually that would have to be considered with the food waste sources, I guess, especially with eggs. You'd have to be careful not to feed them something that'll give the eggs like a fishy taste or something like that.
Right. Right. Sure. Yep. But yeah, that could be chapter 5.
Yeah,
It's good to,
right. That's down the
do
road.
some proof of concept. That's right.
Yeah, we just like
good
to
do
see
some proof of concept.
That's right. That's right. We got to test it in broilers, make sure we don't, totally overwhelm them with the food waste, make sure that they'll eat it. That's a big one.
Sure.
Yeah, but I
Sure.
imagine palatability, we had no issues in the hens, so I've got pretty high hopes for the broiler chickens.
Well, now I asked this question thinking I know the answer to it already, but do you have any potential support for this work moving forward?
Yes. So that's where my award came in. So I only just found
Yeah.
out on Friday, so just a few days ago. So in Australia, we have this program called the DECRA, which is this Discovery Early Career Researcher Award, and that's done by the Australian government. So that's one of the most prestigious awards that an early career researcher can get. So I applied for that, and I was really lucky. I managed to get it. So that provides me with 3 years salary and research funding to explore food waste in broiler chickens. So I'm really looking forward to utilizing that.
Eastman serves veterinarians and nutritionists in agrochemical and animal health industries by helping them select, evaluate, and implement innovative nutritional programs. Eastman works with your team to customize your gut health approach in feed and water. Eastman's approach addresses nutritional and bacterial challenges and finds new ingredient preservation and hygiene solutions. Explore ways to accelerate and innovate your programs. Contact the Animal Nutrition Team at eastman.com.
Yeah, congratulations. That's outstanding. And it really just looks like the work checks a lot of boxes, a lot of things that we need to be thinking about. Yep.
Yeah, it does, especially with like the priorities of the Australian government towards sustainability and improving the strength of our primary industries. So it sort of feeds into a lot of that.
Well, great. So if you don't mind my asking, kind of where would you like to see your career go from here? Any future plans, things you think you'd like to do in your career?
Oh, yeah. I'd just love to continue my research into, food waste and precision nutrition as well. I'd really like to start like maybe a center for sustainability or something at the University of New England, but that's just crazy ideas in my head at the moment. But
Well, so was feeding food waste at one time.
but yeah,
But
that's true.
that's looking like a real potential reality. So you never know.
That's right. It'd be really interesting to see, just where poultry poultry nutrition is in Australia in 5 years' time. Fingers crossed, there's a lot of food waste involved.
Yeah, and I mean, fortunately or unfortunately, that's not going to go away. I mean, that's an issue we're going to have to deal with. There's just, I mean, many efforts certainly underway to reduce food waste and post-harvest loss, and just all kinds of different approaches. But some level of food waste is going to be inevitable, and the byproducts are, inevitable if we continue to produce the main products.
That's right. Yep. We might as well use them for something good rather than just throwing them out.
Well, great. Any other aspects of research or any other interests in the poultry nutrition world that you'd like to share or talk about?
Well, yeah, I guess we could talk about. I've been doing some work with like the variability of feed ingredients, which sort of gets back to the food waste sort of things. But I was looking at the variability of Australian feed ingredients, like the more traditional ingredients. And so we've been talking about how variable food waste is, but actually our traditional ingredients can be quite variable too, as I found. It was amazing, especially because Australia is quite a small industry, especially compared to the US. So our data isn't quite as strong on our feed ingredients, and just looking at like the sample numbers to estimate the mean value with any accuracy, like for your book values, we're lacking a lot of data, especially for things like amino acid data.
But that's great work to support the food waste research, as you mentioned.
Yeah,
Certainly
that's right.
connected. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're stressed about the variability of food waste, but yeah, there is quite still a lot of variability within our own commercial ingredients too.
Sure. Sometimes we're thinking about potential issues with new things, and we forget to ask, wait, is that an issue now too with what we're using? And sometimes it is.
That's right. And, it's all the same sorts of things. You just need really good NIR. Really good NIR programs definitely help to manage that variability.
Well, lots of potential there. Just very, very exciting work. And this is absolutely something that has application virtually anywhere in the world, because food waste is something that we deal with wherever we go.
Definitely. Unfortunately, that's the reality.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, we sure appreciate your time, and thank you for sharing this work. Oh, do you want to? Yeah, you're welcome. We've been talking about the publication. Do you want to give a shout out to where people can find that publication?
So we got that published in Nature Scientific Reports, which was exciting. So it's there, it's open access. So if they look up probably my name, I'm the senior author on the paper, Dr. Moss, food waste, you'll probably be able to find it. Otherwise,
very good.
Happy for listeners to reach out to me directly. I can send them a copy.
Great, sure appreciate that. And yeah, I encourage everyone listening to take a look at that paper. I think it's giving us some great things to think about and a glimpse into the future.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moss. Yeah, we appreciate your time. And thank you, everyone, for listening.
It's time for our famous 3.